I bleeping did it. It only took 1 or 2 nervous breakdowns, a dysphoric haircut, entering my late 20s, and surpassing 100 subscribers, but I did it. Welcome to the final problem. Content warning, this video is going to deal with lots of upsetting and triggering things, such as messed up pregnancies, sexual assault, the Dodd decision, and everything. I've been doing a series on The Handmaid's Tale, or rather I was until... This video is going to be a little different than the 3 that came before it. I'm rather enjoying season 5 of The Handmaid's Tale, but I do think that this video is going to deviate from the hopefully academic tone set by the first 3 videos. So let's set the scene. The first and second video of this series deal with some of the sociological issues that are discussed in the Handmaid's Tale book and, of course, the television show. Television. Yeah. The first one specifically had to do with race and how the show does not depict Gilead as being a white supremacist state, and why I thought that was a problem, or at least that it detracted from the original story. I think the show's critique of fascism is sort of watered down because it doesn't recognize the white supremacist aspect of Margaret Atwood's work. The second video was about the mechanics of gender suppression in The Handmaid's Tale. The Gilead regime divides and conquers women and other non-men. And I think the show doesn't really do that in a way that I kind of like, but that does inevitably contradict some of the things that Atwood is talking about. The world that Margaret Atwood wrote into being is very cynical about the ability of women and non-men to have solidarity with one another. But the women of the show are far more capable of mounting a sort of united front. Eventually, painstakingly, a sort of common cause is established. Not for everybody, but enough to count. All this while the book sort of meditates on the fact that authoritarians continue their work by having minds police themselves. They maintain power through the individual. They make solidarity impossible. I then did a very haphazard part 2.5 where I discussed the, I think, thematic issues that I thought the show was veering into in season 4. The show endows June with a level of moral license and agency that steers her into doing some behaviors that I don't think the show is willing to really discuss honestly. She violates the consent of others. She's given undue prominence and respect, almost as though the other people that are going through the exact same thing as her are somehow less rich, less complex, less able to achieve the feats that she does. They're less unique, somehow. Their trials and traumas are less character building than June's, and that's why we're all expected to default to her opinions. Again, the book is designed to be extremely vague. It's supposed to apply to everybody. We're all the same. We're all human beings. We react to things in more or less the same way. If we pretend like each of us are a different species, that's kind of what the authoritarians want, right? The resistance movement, which should be ubiquitous and focused on solidarity, becomes hyper-individualistic through June and her cult of personality. Just about everything June does is painted to be as inherently okay. The greatness that is June Osborne is, in of itself, enough of an excuse to do behaviors that we find to be unacceptable. And that brings us to part 3, where I throw out all the work I've done so far and just talk to you about my feelings. I will get you to feel a parasocial relationship with me. I will. My feelings on the show have changed quite a bit over the last 15 months, specifically the last couple of months. So yes, it's true that the book is very different than the show. In the book, she's a very weak, passive character by necessity. She's more of a victim of Gilead rather than a rebel against it, which I think is all we can really expect someone like that to be. But the June of the show merely begins a victim, from whence she becomes a hero eventually. And then maybe something else, which I don't know how I feel about that yet. And I've been pretty down on that change in the past few videos. But I'm starting to change that. Maybe. And what it comes down to is that I think the show might be in the process of doing something different than the book, making a different kind of statement, in which case it isn't really fair of me to hold it up to the standard of the book, right? I have to evaluate it on its own terms. So let's discuss. The political backdrop that is relevant to the show has changed quite a bit since the last season, hasn't it? If you have a uterus in the United States right now, there's a good chance that the state you live in cares more about your body's fetus incubation mechanics than it does about your own life or liberty. And forget your pursuit of happiness, right? That fucking sucks, and I can't not think about that as we go into season 5. By the way, if you haven't done anything yet to, protest this decision, stop watching this video, get the fuck out of here and do something. Right now, I dislike you, but you can change that by actually trying to effect some change. I have been thinking for quite some time about June's take a level in badass transformation. So, take a level in badass comes from role-playing, and it's basically you can take a level in a certain class and gain a new set of skills. So you can take a class in Wizard and then learn how to do spells because of that. I don't really do role-playing, but the implication may or may not be that the character sort of got that out of nowhere. It depends on the example, and it definitely can be a good thing. On the one hand, you have characters like Carol from The Walking Dead, who underwent a slow but pretty believable transition from sort of a shrinking Violet who gets walked all over by her husband into a pretty fierce, not even maternal figure, someone who's willing to kill children to do the greater good. On the other hand, you have someone like Sansa from Game of Thrones, who began the show as a naive but clever girl who never let the cruelties of the world stain her compassion. She then transitioned into a more callous and significantly dumber adult who can't shut up about all the ways in which her ally, who has done nothing but good for her, is probably bad in a way.
Men do stupid things for women. They're easily manipulated.
She can't quite articulate what the big deal is, but she knows.
Why her?
Yeah, Queen, that's what I'm wondering too. In Handmaid's Tale, Season 4 June has transitioned almost out of being a real character into the realm of sort of myth. She's a human being, but she's also more than a human being. She's a legend, she's known far and wide, she's a political agent. She's savvy, and she knows how to manipulate the psychology of others to bring about the ends she wants. It was unfortunately getting a little too dark to sustain the, reddish-pink moment. Damn you, son! As I've said, June's perception of the world around her is so much wider than it is in the novel. In the book, she keeps her head down and doesn't try to rock the boat too much. The only real agency she takes is to continue her relationship with Nick, which she only does because Serena Joy basically forces her to try to get pregnant with him. June in the show takes full ownership over herself and even takes responsibility for other people. And so the question on my mind is simple. Are we supposed to be doing that? Is the agency that June takes in fighting her oppression supposed to be exemplary to us? Yes, of course, art is very different from real life. Good drama is about suspending our expectations, and there's a different moral culpability for characters in a show or a piece of literature than there is for real-life human beings. If your uncle kills your father in real life, I personally don't believe that you are inherently responsible for avenging your dad. But in Hamlet, we accept it as a perfectly acceptable plot device. It's good to put Hamlet through internal torment, and so we accept the actions of his uncle as being not moral, but necessary. And most stories are like this. No matter how horrible the worlds of our stories are, the main character has to eventually learn something from the people around them, and learn how to best the world that they're stuck in. An example of Handmaid's Tale doing this to excellent effect is Season 3, Episode 9, Heroic. The story features 3 characters who are undeniably evil, doing things that help our main character out in a way that could almost be interpreted as heroic. For just a moment, they aren't villains. They're helping our protagonist. The episode takes place after June orchestrates a plot that ends in the brain death of Natalie, another handmaid who is also pregnant. The doctors keep Natalie alive with the intention of taking her off life support as soon as the fetus can be extracted. Fetuses are not people, by the way. And because June pulled strings to make this thing happen, Aunt Lydia punishes her by having her kneel at Natalie's bedside for over a month until she gives birth. This is very clearly a form of torture, right? Her knees are constantly bloody and in agony. Her mind starts to focus on these tiny little things, trying to force meaning and movement into static and meaningless objects. The doctor shuffles in and out, ignoring June, cutting Natalie open right in front of her. Lydia punishes other handmaids for even reaching out to comfort her. And then as the cherry on top, Serena Joy, the person who's been making her life a living hell, waltzes in and doesn't even spare her a glance, despite all they've been through together. And this whole time you're thinking, like, fuck these people, fuck these people, fuck these people. June, you're gonna fucking kill these people, right? But when she does actually try to kill Serena, Serena gives her the benefit of the doubt. She doesn't try to get June in trouble. She seems to know that she isn't malicious. She's just in hell and willing to do anything to make it stop. The doctor then comes in, the doctor that's been treating Natalie like a broken machine that hasn't quite yet outlived its purpose, and offers to bandage her up. As they talk, the doctor blatantly ignores his Hippocratic oath. It's not the living woman in the hospital bed over there that is his patient. It's the fetus inside her. Her? He can cut up her body to his own convenience. She's not dead yet, but she was never really a human to begin with. And then he says something really fucking insane. I honor the handmaid's life by saving her child's. How will you honor your daughter's? It's fucking crazy, right? What does that even mean? He honors Natalie's life? Like, does that have any utilitarian effect on her at all? Does that help her in any way? Also, do you not remember the fact that the baby was literally going to be taken away from her the minute it was born? Does it also honor her when you slice her leg open to get nutrients directly into the baby's tube? What the fuck are you talking about? And yet, what he says rather unfortunately affects June. She's been running around conspiring against other handmaids and women, the oppressed. She hates so much there's no more room inside her for anything else, and so she just kills and causes chaos wantonly. But hatred isn't really the source of June's anger. It's love. Sort of. Love is weird. And this sentence from the doctor is what ends up inspiring June to coordinate the Angel's flight at the end of the season. Shitty person, good character. Poor sentiment, but wise words. Really bad behavior in general, but inspiring a really good moral decision. And what's worse is that Aunt Lydia also gets like a really sweet redemptive moment with Janine. The fuck? And yes, it's very infuriating to see the doctor get the last word, that the script has the balls to make this monster appear as anything less than the piece of shit that he is. But it inspires June to be heroic, and that's what we want to see. It makes for a good story, and in the end, that's kind of why we're here. We seek out the show to see art, drama, entertainment, and I make no claims about the inherent goodness of art. I hate art and everyone who makes it. You should all be ashamed of yourself. Art is morally neutral, and sometimes what makes for good art also makes for morally ambiguous territory for idiots online. Sometimes what is in service of good art is not in service of the most unambiguous expression of good morality. Sometimes you just have to ignore the fact that a lot of people watching your thing are gonna be dumb moralistic idiots. But I am kind of a dumb moralistic idiot, and this is too much complexity for me. Sometimes my gut reactions to things are to make criticisms that my more rational side would never agree with. I've been fearing for some time now, generally throughout season 4, that the writers were going to be going down some moral territory that I didn't approve of. There was this weird precedent for model victim behavior that I just didn't really like. You can go see part 2.5 if you want to learn about that. The main thing that made me want to write this video was one very unfortunate episode in which June sexually assaults her husband Luke. My contention in that video was that the writing staff seems to vindicate June's shitty, horrible actions. Implies that these horrible actions are acceptable when done by June under these horrible circumstances and with her noble aspirations. Implies that her behavior is ultimately noble, acceptable, heroic. It's because she's a big person with a big legend and big aspirations. That means the little people who get hurt along the way just didn't really matter enough. That's what I thought my issue was back then, but it's been a long time since that video, and I'm not so sure that is what I was feeling. As it turns out, the writing staff was not vindicating her behavior wholly. In fact, it was in the process of shaming her for her behavior. Season 5 demonstrates June feeling guilt over Fred Waterford's murder. I wanted her to be held accountable, but I didn't want her to be shamed for it. I wanted Fred to die. He deserved to die. Why is she suddenly demonstrating this hypersensitive conscience that doesn't make any sense to anyone in the real world? The very first episode of season 5 has a deliberate, blatant allusion to Lady Macbeth. She sees Fred Waterford's blood on her hands, and it doesn't wash off for several scenes. It persists. It lingers everywhere. In the car, on the plate, in the food that she eats. It's this out-damned spot moment where she gets into a river and tries to scrub the blood off of her. And that's upsetting, because we should be allowed to root for her doing this. It should be fine. It's fine. It's good. The world is better without him. If he had gotten diplomatic immunity in Geneva, he never would have been punished for doing his shitty things, and people wouldn't have been afraid that he died. I don't give a single shit if June Osborne is a murderer on screen. We are being stripped of our bodily autonomy in this fucking world. And every single time June gets one over on a pro-lifer, we fucking feel that. Why does this show insist on making June morally dubious? Why do we have to play this game of jumping around between being empowered by her and feeling what she's going through and needing to perform moral disgust at her behavior? It's really hard watching this victim become a perpetrator. I don't think that she's morally equivalent to Fred Waterford or Serena Joy or anyone else that ended democracy in America. I mean, what the fuck is Bruce Miller saying? What? The book has a very clean moral statement to make, and it's exposing this strategy. It doesn't really care about human beings. They orchestrate the division and conquest of marginalized groups. They remove their potential allies and give women very good reasons to mistrust each other. And a lot of people die and suffer, and then it ends, and Offred is gone. And the world continues, and Gilead eventually falls. And there is nothing to do. There is no one to petition. There's no one to kill. There's only time and history to close up this putrid gash on humanity. And it's vindicating. And it's sad. And it's so real you don't know what to do with all these feelings that you have about it. And there's nowhere to go when you put the book down. And when Gilead happens, it will be this irresistible tidal wave of death and despair and pain and humiliation. And that's that. There is no such thing as apolitical art. Whether it's catastrophic and elicits indomitable fear and resignation, or if it elicits something like hope or even transcendence, it will affect us, and we are politics. As we watch June learn through her suffering, we cannot help but see this as anything other than a political observation. Could it be anything but that? Is there anything to do about our situation? Really? Are we in control of our politics? This is a non-intentional self-plug, but a few months back I wrote an article about the Dodd decision. I basically argue that it warrants no less outrage and should evoke no less of a response than did the AIDS crisis. I think we should be fashioning our response along the lines of the ACT UP coalition. Really artistically demonstrate the fear and the desperation and the pain that this is going to cause. The more theatrical nature of some of ACT UP's greatest hits were really effective. The Ashes action, the die-in at St. Patrick's Cathedral, their 1987 New York Pride Parade float. These actions were spectacular. They were big and meaningful and sad. I can't tell you how disappointing the past few months have been for me. And it's not the many statewide abortion bans that are being put into effect. That was going to happen anyway, and I don't trust conservatives to grow a conscience overnight. Our response to it? That was controllable, and we've just done nothing but fuck it up. It didn't have to be like this. We already knew that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. It was leaked. We had time to prepare. In the months preceding the decision, I looked for things to do. I looked for emerging groups. I looked for actions that I could take. I looked for any kind of mutual aid option I could really engage in. And there were a few. There was a couple. The night of the decision, I went down to Washington Square Park, where 10,000 people marched up Fifth Avenue into Bryant Park. It was really big, but there's 8 million people in New York. I had just been able to find a tweet about that action that day, which is not good. Things should have been in preparation for weeks. I later found out that this huge gathering was organized by a very small leftist magazine called Left Voice. A group of internet socialists? How the fuck was Planned Parenthood not in on this? Like, how did they not organize it? Why was it only 10,000 people? As Larry Kramer said, that's not going to make anyone pay attention, not until we get millions out there. Apparently, Planned Parenthood didn't want to hold a rally like this, because they thought that what the people wanted was a day of mourning. Mourning? As if it were death, as if it were inevitable, as if the bans couldn't be fought, as if the Roe v. Wade ending didn't mean that there was an immediate ban happening. There was still room to do things. With blood and sweat and suffering, there were things to do. It was infuriating. It was embarrassing. It was like, imagine if George Floyd's death had been reacted to in the same way. Like, Derek Chauvin would be killing another person right now. I wanted to see something big. I wanted to see that we had any capacity to control our fate politically. The conservatives infiltrated the fucking Capitol building. I wanted to see if we could mobilize any sort of defense, and we haven't. And I haven't seen anything worthwhile. And I don't know what to do, because my heart is with Margaret Atwood's novel. Death and suffering are inevitable, and the only thing that will stop it is more death. And I want to hate on the other people who are in the same boat as me for not recognizing how thoroughly fucked over we're being. Like, am I mad at women now? Like, what makes us different from any other group that has fought tooth and nail to make change happen? The women of Gilead did not begin resisting overnight. It took some time, and I guess that's what it takes, time and literal sex slavery? Is that what it takes? It needs to get really bad. And then that's the weak hope that the show provides, that eventually it will get bad enough that we will have to do something about it. I'm not in the same headspace that I was in at the beginning of this series. Things have changed for me and for the world, and it's useless to pretend like I feel the same way. But in another way, has anything really changed? Have we changed? Can we change? And I'm angry at the show. As good as it is, it's just breaking my heart. I have nothing to contribute to this struggle other than words of anger. And this anger, this desire to break the world with myself inside of it, just to stop the humiliation that comes from kneeling down while you're being mocked in this way, while you're being beaten and killed. That kind of anger is not sustainable. It degrades over time, very fast. And Serena Joy is getting a fucking love interest? Like, what do I care if she's getting dicked or not? She's a monster. Why are we pretending like there's moral ambiguity here? Like she deserves happiness. She doesn't. She's not heroic. She's a villain. The instructional value of The Handmaid's Tale as a series that is trying to perhaps inspire action in its viewers is meaningless. It says nothing, so it can't be effective. Or at least it hasn't yet. And maybe that's a little bit too much to ask. Maybe it's not fair to put that responsibility on the writers of a television show. But you know what? I think it's all of our responsibilities now. Like, we're all about to die. We're all about to die. We're gonna die handcuffed to gurneys and at home with our abusers and in back alleys where we get really bad illegal abortions. And like, if that happens, it won't matter if like the artistic integrity of the show remained unscathed. Yeah, I guess I'm anti-art now. Fine, I'm cool with that. Fuck art. I guess I just don't care much about my thematic statement at the moment. I don't care if June's great woman individualism is liberal bullshit or not. I just want to see her kill someone I hate. So that's part 3. I am physically and mentally incapable of making a part 3. Stay tuned next time. Good luck out there. Solidarity, and